Hi there. Tonight we are telling stories of fashion and the influence of the well-known brand Chanel. Before we dive into our story, do you like Chanel? People rarely say, let's go check what we can buy at Chanel. They are more likely to say, I want to reward myself a Chanel. One day, I can buy as many Chanels as I want. Chanel is not just a product people purchase. It is more of a goal people imagine, a symbol people manifest. Relax your mind, make yourself comfortable. Just like that, now we shall dive into the story for tonight. Why has Chanel become something people attach their identity, freedom, and self-worth to? To understand that, let us step away from the boutique and go back to the old times. Gabrielle Coco Chanel is often described as a woman who rose from nothing. Well, this part is true. She was born into poverty in 1883. After her mother died, she spent years in an orphanage. There, she lived among strict rules, silent, and the visual language of black and white. Simplicity was not a choice. It was reality and survival. This early life did not teach her elegance. It taught her restraint as well as one practical skill that would later matter, sewing, and restraint would later become her signature. At the time, sewing was not a creative path. It was one of the few ways a poor woman could earn a living. As a young adult, Chanel worked as a seamstress, and briefly as a cafe singer in provincial towns. Her singing career did not succeed, but the cafes placed her in spaces where wealthy men gathered. Spaces where class boundaries were rigid, yet not entirely closed. Through these social circles, she became involved with men who had financial and social capital. Etienne Balsan introduced her to upper-class leisure life, and Arthur Boy Capel provided some financial support that allowed her to open her first millinery shop. This support was not unusual for the time. For women without inheritance or formal education, access to capital often came through personal relationships. What made Chanel different was what she did once she had that access. She began by designing hats, simple, undecorated, and noticeably restrained. In contrast to the elaborate styles of the era, actresses and socially visible women started wearing them, and her work became associated with a quiet kind of modernity. Chanel did not rise by being invited into the fashion establishment. She positioned herself just close enough to observe it, understand it, and offer something it was missing. Her entry into fashion was not a fairy tale. It was a negotiation with class, gender, and limitation, and a reminder that for many women of her time, creation began only after survival was. While World War II was devastating to many, Chanel's business grew and grew, with her military uniform-inspired designs becoming famous throughout France. By 1915, she was able to open her first fashion house in Biarritz, employing over 300 people, and her designs were high on the list of every fashion buyer in Europe. After the war, she continued to develop her business, creating fashions very in line with the trends of the day. It was, of course, the era of the flapper, and in 1921 launched her first perfume, Chanel No. 5. What is considered the most iconic product of Chanel? In 1952, Marilyn Monroe uttered her famous response to the question of what she wore to bed: "I only wear Chanel, number 5, ensuring the name of Chanel took on new status. Since its inception in 1921, Chanel number 5 has been the cornerstone of the Chanel empire. Designed as an extension of her clothing and echoing her vision of modernity, Gabrielle Coco Chanel created her debut perfume, which became the signature scent of the fashion house. Created by the Russian-born French perfumer Ernest Beau, who had previously supplied the Russian imperial court, number 5 was a unique scent made from over 80 ingredients, including jasmine, ylang-ylang, sandalwood, May rose, and neroli. Beau initially created 10 samples, and Gabrielle Chanel chose number 5, her favorite number and the ultimate name for the scent. Number 5 was notable for its experimental use of aldehydes, an organic chemical compound. At the time, Chanel number 5 was an incredibly modern perfume. The resulting scent had no discernible floral fragrance, which was markedly different from most 1,920 seconds women's perfume. In contrast to the highly decorative, Art Nouveau-inspired bottles of other perfumers, Gabrielle Chanel chose a simple square bottle reminiscent of medicine vials or men's perfume bottles. The original 1,921 bottle featured a square stopper etched with 2 interlocking C's enclosed in a circle. The first time Chanel used what would become iconic, shorthand for the brand. In 1924, the square stopper became facetted and octagonal, and the bottle became beveled. Despite minor modifications, the stark and clean design with simple off-white label and black lettering has remained largely unchanged since it was launched. Likewise, the formula for Chanel No. 5 has stayed the same since Ernest Beau first created it over a century ago. Chanel No. 5 would go on to become the world's best-selling fragrance and remains a bestseller today, underlining its modern and timeless appeal. When Chanel entered the fashion world, women were still dressed to be looked at, not to move. Corsets restricted breathing. Decoration mattered more than comfort. Clothing reflected class hierarchy and obedience. Chanel rejected this. She borrowed from menswear. She simplified silhouettes. She removed excess. Not to make women invisible, but to let them exist with less restriction. For many women at the time, her designs felt radical, not because they were extravagant, but because they allowed autonomy. Chanel's fashion aligned with a larger shift. Women entering public life, working, earning, moving, and this is where the myth begins. Chanel was framed as a symbol of female freedom, a woman who succeeded on her own terms, a designer who liberated the female body. But history is rarely that clean. Have you ever heard of the sweet Coco Chanel? During World War II, Chanel lived in Paris while it was occupied by Nazi Germany. She stayed at the Riz Hotel Paris. She had documented associations with German officers. She also attempted to use anti-Jewish laws to gain full control of the Chanel No. 5 perfume business, which was largely owned by the Jewish Wertheimer family. These are historical records, not rumors. They complicate the narrative. Chanel's new role as Nazi collaborator became an open secret, and she was actually sent to London to meet with Winston Churchill to present a peace plan devised by Heinrich Himmler as he sought to avoid war on 2 fronts against the Allies and the Soviet Army. After the war, she was arrested as a collaborator, but saved from imprisonment, or worse, by Churchill himself. Her actions, however, meant that she had to flee to Switzerland, where she remained with her lover von Dinklage for 8 years. In 1953, Chanel returned to Paris, finding the fashion house of Christian Dior in Ascension, and the new look worn across Europe. Designs that used meters and meters of fabric, a true luxury after the privations of the war. Chanel, in contrast, released her elegant, sharply cut two-piece suit, a design that has stood the test of time when the new look hasn't. Chanel had lost none of her business savvy and found a new financial backer to help her relaunch her ready-to-wear, jewelry and haute couture collections. In 1955, she launched her first quilted leather handbag, the 2.55. Now, that's an icon. Chanel was not a flawless feminist icon. She was, apparently, ambitious, strategic, and at times aligned herself with power when it benefited her. This contradiction matters, because from the very beginning, Chanel was built on tension between independence and privilege, freedom and control, simplicity and ambition. And perhaps this unresolved tension is what made the brand emotionally powerful, also made people to talk about the brand, about Coco Chanel more. Coco Chanel remained intimately involved with her brand for more than 6 decades, from the first hat shop she opened in 1910 until her passing in 1971. Her influence shaped not only the clothes women wore, but also the way women imagined themselves, as independent, composed, and visible in a world that often tried to confine them. After Coco Chanel's death in 1971, the brand slowly lost relevance. By the late 1972, Chanel was seen as conservative, aging, and disconnected from youth culture. The world had changed. Fashion had changed. Chanel, at that moment, risked becoming history instead of desire. In 1983, Karl Lagerfeld took over as creative director. His task was not to erase Chanel's past. It was to reinterpret it. Karl Lagerfeld understood something crucial, that modern luxury is not about preservation. It is about translation. He kept the symbols, the tweed, the camellia, the double C, but he shifted their meaning. Under Lagerfeld, Chanel became louder, bolder, and deeply aware of pop culture. Runway shows became spectacles. Models became muses, not mannequins. Chanel was no longer just heritage. It became an image of confidence, of effortless authority, of someone who does not need to explain herself. Importantly, Lagerfeld did not modernize Chanel by making it relatable but still distant. In other words, it was no longer old. It was untouchable, and that distinction would define the brand's power. Chanel rarely explains itself. It does not rely heavily on discounts, nor does it flood the market with accessibility. Instead, it practices controlled scarcity. Prices increase regularly. Popular bags are difficult to obtain. Waiting lists are normalized if you really want a bag. From a psychological perspective, this creates a specific emotional response. When access is limited, ownership feels earned. Chanel does not ask, "Do you want this?" It silently asks, "Are you worthy of this?" Over time, the product becomes secondary. What matters is what the product represents. For many people, a Chanel bag marks a transition. Financial independence, career achievement, emotional survival. It becomes a reward, a proof, and slowly Chanel transforms from an object into a symbol of arrival. Chanel's power is amplified through people, not just celebrities, but very specific kinds of women. Audrey Hepburn, Princess Diana, Keira Knightley, Lily Rose Depp, Jennie from Blackpink. These women are not only admired, they are watched. They represent a type of femininity that appears effortless, composed, and desired. When they wear Chanel, the brand absorbs their narrative, and young women, consciously or not, begin to project themselves into that image. What they want is not the jacket, not the bag, nor the earrings. They want the calm confidence, the validation, the sense of being chosen. In the age of social media, this effect intensifies. Images circulate endlessly. My first Chanel, a gift to myself, milestone achieved. Chanel becomes visual proof that one's life is progressing correctly, especially for young women navigating insecurity, comparison, and peer pressure. Chanel offers something stable, a recognizable symbol of success that does not need explanation. A Chanel bag represents unparalleled French design. Unlike many luxury brands that rushed into e-commerce, Chanel has approached digital transformation with care. From curated social media campaigns to digital storytelling and virtual try-on technologies, Chanel uses technology to enhance customer experience and build more loyalty. The Chanel Connect series, where leading voices in art, fashion, and film discuss culture and creativity, is an example of how content can elevate a luxury brand's narrative. Nowadays, Chanel handbags are more than just luxury accessories. Society considers them timeless symbols of status, craftsmanship, and exclusivity. Their enduring appeal has kept demand consistently higher than supply, allowing Chanel to strategically increase prices while maintaining their allure. Since the start of the global pandemic, the brand has raised handbag prices multiple times with no sign of slowing. People do not manifest Chanel because of leather quality or historical craftsmanship. Well, some would doubt if all that still exists nowadays. They manifest Chanel because it represents a version of the self that feels composed, respected, and complete. Chanel promises distance from chaos, distance from need, distance from being underestimated. Across different cultures, especially among young women, Chanel appears again and again on vision boards, milestone lists, and quiet promises made to the future self. It suggests that once you own it, you have arrived. No one needs to know how much effort you have made to seem effortless, since Chanel speaks for you. But what is your honest opinion? This is also where reflection becomes necessary. Because when desire is shaped externally, achievement can feel strangely empty. Chanel is not inherently empowering, nor is it inherently manipulative. It is a mirror. People see in it what they have been taught to want. So perhaps the more important question is not, When will I own Chanel? But what do I believe owning it will finally say about me? And who taught me to believe that? If you watch until here, SleepyBunny feels so honored to accompany you tonight. Remember that. Tonight, you do not have to figure out anything. Just relax. Thank you for finishing the story. See you very soon.